This is a lecture from OpenTuition.
I'm going to be looking at a question in the ACCA AAA SPECIMEM exam. The question is called Rivers. If you are watching this on the OpenTuition website, then you will find a PDF of Rivers that you can open. If you're not, go to the OpenTuition website, open up the PDF and have a look at the question, probably for half an hour before you watch the debrief. What we will be doing is seeing where the technical marks come from, but also the professional skills marks, and also thinking about the way that you approach the question. In Rivers, the marks broke down into two parts, 20 for technical, that was not subdivided, and 5 for professional skills. The professional skills being examined were analysis and evaluation, which I am abbreviating to AE, professional skepticism and judgment, which I'm abbreviating to PSJ, and commercial acumen, which I'm abbreviating to CA. In terms of the technical marks, it's probably 20 good sentences, each making a good point that will make up those technical marks. So issues will not be developed for a huge amount of points. Thinking initially about what they're going to be looking for when they give us the professional skills marks, well, these are the sorts of things. So in analysis and evaluation, very important that we link the scenario to the knowledge that we bring to the exam. And almost every sentence should have something from the scenario and something from your brain that's relevant to the exam. In addition, analysis and evaluation means that you are suggesting things which are relevant to this scenario. So any steps or procedures you come up with seem sensible in this particular scenario. Professional skepticism and judgment, challenging the information in the scenario where things don't seem plausible, probing, asking for more information when needed, and probably, because the question involves quality management, making comments that are relevant about the whole process of quality management once we've read the scenario. Commercial acumen, suggesting how quality management could be improved, and thinking perhaps about wider issues like the reputation of the firm if we don't sort things out in terms of the quality of the work we do. Now, when you write your answer, you don't have to sit there in the exam saying, I wonder if this is PSJ or CA or AE, but we do know that the skills we need to demonstrate are to link the scenario with relevant points of knowledge, suggest actions that are relevant, challenge and probe, comment overall about quality management and how it could be improved, and think about the wider impact on the firm. Some of you might be saying, well, I'll be doing that anyway. Well, if you're doing that anyway, that's good. If you're not doing it though, it helps just to think about where those marks are going to be allocated. Now, the requirement of the technical marks was not broken down. So essentially, it didn't say how many marks for each of quality management, ethical, professional and actions. So we have got to deal with all of those, but we can deal with them at the same time because it's not really broken down into separate sections. What do you do next? Do you start by reading the scenario? I think the answer is no. I think you need to spend a minute first thinking about what's going to be in the answer. And you say, well, I don't know what will be in the answer. Yes, you do if you're prepared. And the reason is you need to have a brainstorm. And the brainstorm, if you're not very good at brainstorming, I would learn what I'm suggesting here. This is not specific to the scenario, but it is specific to the requirement. So, in this kind of question, where anything at all where you see words like professional, ethics, and so on, a mnemonic that I use is PIQTA. P-I-Q-T-A. Look at the yellow words. Think about any relevant ethical principles, integrity, objectivity, and so on. Think about whether there are any legal issues in here or illegal, laws, fraud, money laundering, litigation, anything like that. There's not a huge amount in here, in this scenario, I think. Think about quality management. We'll come back to that. Think about your standard threats to objectivity, self-interest, self-review, familiarity, and think about actions. So I would certainly have typed those yellow words first, just to remind me that this is what the answer will be full of. But because quality management is there, then I think probably we might need to brainstorm that as well. So remember, there is an ACCA 220, which deals with quality management at the audit level and talks about the 6 components of quality management at the audit level. For them, I use the mnemonic LEREM. Leadership, ethics, acceptance, resources, engagement performance, and monitoring. Blue words on the screen in front of you. That's not me being clever. That's what the standard says. So when I find quality management issues, I need to link them up with those sorts of words. Perhaps the only one you need to think about a bit more is engagement performance. That would include things like supervision. It would include things like day-to-day review of the work. It would include things like opportunity for staff to have consultation, delegation, all those sorts of things. Don't forget as well, although it's not probably a big thing with this, when we talk about resources now, ACCA 220 talks about human resources, which are very relevant here, intellectual resources, and the tech or technological resources like the IT. Intellectual resources, things like whether they're following the audit procedures manual. Well, digressed a little bit there. But those blue words are vital. In addition now, we have International Standard on Quality Management 1 and 2. And they also say that the firm should have a risk assessment process to confirm that quality management is in place. So if you find there are problems with quality management, then what a great point to make that they should put this risk assessment process in place, that there should be proper information and communication, And also, ISQM2 deals with the engagement quality or quality management review. That is the thing that is done right at the end of the audit, isn't it? So right at the end of the audit, in a listed company, this review by a second partner. I think most people would call that the engagement quality review, really. So you take a minute thinking about that lot, then you read the scenario, and then life will become straightforward because it will be very easy to link the scenario back to your knowledge and pick up the marks. Now, the thing I'm going to show you now looks like a table. I would not be answering this in a table, but I'm just showing you how we start to construct the sentences. Everything on the left-hand side is something that I've copied from the scenario. Everything on the right is a relevant point of knowledge. Now, every time you link the two, that's where you're getting your analysis and evaluation marks. So, in addition, in places, I've picked out where you might be getting credit for commercial acumen, with coming up with practical suggestions, professional skepticism and judgment, again, when you are challenging the information in the scenario. So let's have a look down the things that I would have picked up just looking down that scenario. The client is listed, so initially that therefore means they need an engagement quality review. There's no evidence of that in the scenario, and you're given the little analysis of time. So if there'd been an engagement quality review, presumably that would have had 10 hours or 12 hours of a partner's time. I don't know the exact number, but we're just saying it's not on that list of hours. Corporate governance is in place, it says, and therefore a very good action when appropriate is to discuss things. You can either say with those charged with governance or with the audit committee. That shows to me commercial acumen, but make sure you're specific about what you're discussing. So don't just say discuss things, pick up a specific issue that would need discussion with them, whatever it happens to be. Very straightforward point that you'd all get right. They've had the same engagement partner for 8 years. We know we can link that to the familiarity threat because it's too trusting, and the rotation rule after 7 years. You look at the time records. If you audit in practice, I suppose you might have been able to stand back and say, well, the amount of time doesn't look very large for a listed company. If you don't audit in practice, we wouldn't think about that. It's not the end of the world, but you would certainly get credit if you made the point. What is very clear, though, is that inadequate time has been spent by senior staff, hence professional skepticism and judgment. And it says in the scenario that actually the manager completed the final review, not the senior manager, not the partner. So there's lots there you can link to quality management, review, delegation, supervision, and so on. We then learn about the non-audit work that's been performed by Bob. So, straightforward, I think, to talk about management threat, self-review threat. We don't know what that work is. We know it's a listed company. We demonstrate our knowledge that it's public interest because that's what listed companies are. So self-review management, easy to comment on. In addition, when you look at the fee levels, which are enormous for this special work, clearly that's where the fees suggest a self-interest threat arising. And don't forget to explain self-interest, that there's a perception at least that Bob would be reluctant to disagree with the client because of the size of the fee. After that, the going concern has been delegated to the audit assistant. Poor delegation. And again, as soon as you're making a sensible suggestion for quality control, I think that's helping towards your commercial acumen score, so it should at least have been done by the audit manager. Client selected the samples. Well done if you spotted that. Professional skepticism, we know that we should select the sample. What's the quality management point? The point is the audit assistant didn't realise that. That means that she or he had not been properly trained. So for the firm, it's lack of training. Audit data analytics have been used to do things like confirm the forecast or whatever is in line with assumptions, but there's been no challenge of the assumptions. So no judgment exercised by the assistant, the audit junior. As a side issue, if you see forecasts in any question, there's always a mark washing around for using that word sensitivity analysis. That's where you do things like break-even sales, isn't it? Which you've learnt in another subject somewhere, and that always seems to fit in. So it's always worth tucking that in for a cheeky mark. They've only spent 8 hours on the going concern review. Again, you're saying, well, I don't know what is normal. Well, in the scenario, you saw the word significant risk. As soon as you see the word significant risk, it should be ringing a bell. There's a little bell, ringing a bell and saying, bring that into my answer somehow. So clearly, that should have been sorted out perhaps at the planning meeting. If the question deals with quality management, always stand back at the end to firm in your professional skepticism and judgment, to firm in your commercial acumen by just saying things need sorting out. But obviously, more specifically, there's been an inadequate process of monitoring and remediation. I didn't type it here, but you could then say they need to conduct a thorough risk assessment on quality management, but give examples of where things have been inadequate. So the engagement, quality review and so on. And perhaps talk about loss of reputation and so on. Here's an example of a point written up. I've picked partner rotation, which technically is an easy point, but just to show you how to really make sure I'm putting everything in place. I start with the scenario. The audit engagement partner has been in place for 8 years. There's my scenario. I've linked it to the familiarity threat. What many students do not do is then explain the threat. Familiarity means too trusting of the client. I'm now bringing in some knowledge, and the knowledge, of course, is the maximum of 7 years because it's a public interest entity. And finally, I'm suggesting a solution, which is a very straightforward solution, that a new partner should take responsibility for the audit. I think that sounds better than just saying rotates the partner, which sounds a bit as if you want them to go for a ride on a roundabout. So looking back for a moment, look at a couple of the things that I focused on especially. The first is, in this style of question, like most questions, have a brainstorm first. As you study past questions, you'll build up your little collection of them. So this will work for quality management, ethics, professional, and so on. Have a brainstorm first. And secondly, when you write the sentences, make sure you're linking the scenario back with the point of knowledge. That's how to make sure we're maximizing our credit. Thank you.